Imagine a murder trial with no body, no autopsy, no clear crime scene. The alleged victim is simply gone, yet a jury still returns a verdict, guilty of homicide. This isn't rare fiction. These are real no-body cases. Prosecutions where the state claims someone is dead and murdered, even though their remains have never been found. To most of us, that sounds almost impossible. How can you prove someone is dead without a body? How can you prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt when there's no traditional forensic centerpiece? Across the last few decades, prosecutors have increasingly brought these cases, powered by digital footprints, financial trails, and sophisticated forensics. But the stakes are enormous. Get it wrong, and you've convicted someone of killing a person who might still be alive. In this video, we're going deep into how no-body cases really work, the evidence, the strategy, the risks, and the controversies. To understand no-body cases, we need to step inside the criminal justice system and see how prosecutors prove any homicide. Typically, the body provides proof of death, cause of death, and sometimes who did it. Take that away, and the entire case has to be built from everything else: behavior, science, and patterns. In this episode, we'll walk through the legal standards, the most common types of evidence used, and real case examples where juries have convicted without a single bone recovered. We'll also look at the dangers. What if a missing person has simply started a new life? If you're into true crime, law, or just how far evidence can be stretched in court, you're in the right place. Stick around until the end because the final segments will pull together what these cases really say about our justice system. And if you like detailed breakdowns like this, consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell. Before any evidence matters, prosecutors face a threshold question: is there even a crime? In a typical murder case, a body immediately signals a death, and forensic examiners can often determine if it was natural, accidental, or homicide. In a no-body case, prosecutors must prove three things to the jury. 1, that the missing person is actually dead. 2, that the death was caused by a criminal act, not accident or suicide. And 3, that the defendant is the one responsible. Legally, the standard never changes: guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. What changes is the pathway to get there. Instead of a coroner's report, the state leans heavily on circumstantial evidence, indirect clues that, taken together, point to a single reasonable conclusion. Courts have repeatedly said that circumstantial evidence can be just as powerful as direct evidence. In fact, many no-body convictions have been upheld on appeal as solid and legally sufficient. The first building block is proving the person is, in all likelihood, dead. Juries are skeptical, and they should be. People disappear voluntarily, flee abusive relationships, or start new lives. So prosecutors assemble a portrait of a life that suddenly stops. They show phone records: no calls, no texts, no logins. Bank accounts that were once active go silent. No ATM withdrawals, no payroll deposits spent, no rent checks. Social media freezes. Medical appointments are missed. Prescriptions go unfilled. They bring in friends, family, employers. Did this person talk about running away? Were they deeply depressed or planning future events? A wedding, a job promotion, a child's birthday. Evidence of plans and attachments suggests they wouldn't just vanish. In strong no-body cases, the missing person leaves behind vital items: passport, car, beloved pets, or children. Taken together, prosecutors argue the only reasonable inference is that the person isn't hiding. They're dead. Next, prosecutors must show the death was a homicide, not accident, suicide, or natural causes. Without a body, that's a huge leap, so they rely on context. They may introduce evidence of recent threats, escalating domestic violence, or a bitter breakup. Text messages where the defendant says things like, "If you leave me, I'll kill you." Searches on the defendant's computer for phrases like, "how to dispose of a body," or "how long before someone is declared dead." They also look for staged scenes: a car left abandoned with keys in the ignition, but no fingerprints where you'd expect them. A supposed suicide note that a handwriting expert says is likely forged. If the missing person was in good health, making future plans, and not in a place that would suggest accident, no dangerous hiking trip, no storm at sea, Prosecutors argue homicide is the most reasonable explanation, especially if the defendant's behavior turns suspicious immediately after the disappearance. In modern no-body cases, digital evidence is often the star witness. Phones, laptops, GPS units, smartwatches, even fitness trackers create timelines that can contradict the defendant's story. Investigators may show that the victim's phone stopped moving and went dark at a specific time, right when the defendant's phone was in the same location. Or they might demonstrate that a supposedly asleep defendant was actually Googling deep lakes near me at 3:17 a.m. Security and doorbell cameras can reveal cars coming and going, or capture audio of an argument without showing the people involved. License plate readers track when a suspect's car entered a remote area but never left. Prosecutors weave these data points into a narrative: the last digital footprint of the victim, the overlapping movements of the defendant, and the suspicious searches and deletions that follow. Each bit is small, but collectively, the digital trail can be devastating. Even without a body, physical forensics can be powerful. Bloodstain pattern analysis, for example, can suggest a violent assault even if the room has been cleaned. Luminol and other reagents reveal hidden blood. DNA testing can tie that blood to the missing person. Prosecutors sometimes present evidence of more blood than a person could survive losing, supported by expert testimony. They may highlight cast-off patterns, impact spatter on ceilings, or cleanup attempts like bleach traces and missing carpet. Other forensic clues include fragments of bone or tissue found in vehicles, drains, or fire pits, traces of the victim's DNA in the trunk of the defendant's car, or tool marks consistent with dismemberment or concealment. The defense will challenge these interpretations, arguing contamination or alternative explanations. But if experts testify that the scene reflects a lethal, not accidental amount of force, jurors may accept that a homicide occurred, even if the body itself remains missing. Circumstantial evidence isn't just science, it's human behavior. Prosecutors often focus heavily on what the defendant did before and after the disappearance. Did the defendant suddenly clean their car at midnight, deep clean the house, or repaint a room for no clear reason? Did they buy unusual items beforehand? Heavy-duty trash bags, bleach, a shovel, a large tarp, extra fuel cans. Insurance policies taken out shortly before the disappearance can look suspicious, especially if the defendant is the beneficiary. So can sudden financial moves, cashing out retirement accounts, trying to sell the victim's property, or accessing their bank and credit cards almost immediately. Then there's demeanor evidence, inconsistent stories to police, obvious lies about small details, or a lack of concern about finding the missing person. None of this individually proves murder, but prosecutors argue that, collectively, these behaviors make innocent explanations harder and harder to believe. Confessions, statements, and jailhouse conversations can make or break a no-body case. Sometimes defendants confess partially, admitting a fight, an accidental death, or involvement in disposing of a body, but denying murder. Prosecutors use these admissions to fill gaps. He told officers she died, and he hid her body. If the story were truly an accident, why not call 911? There are also admissions by conduct, leading police to a location where they claim a body was once hidden, or discussing the crime in coded language with friends. In jail, some defendants brag or seek sympathy, and fellow inmates later testify. But this is dangerous territory. Jailhouse informants have incentives to lie, hoping for reduced sentences. Modern juries are more skeptical, and judges often instruct them to treat such testimony with caution. Still, when a defendant's own words line up with the circumstantial evidence, prosecutors argue it's powerful proof that a homicide occurred and who committed it. One classic way a no-body case unfolds is the missing person turned murder scenario. It starts with a worried family reporting someone overdue from work or not picking up their kids. Police initially treat it as a disappearance. As days pass, red flags pile up. No phone activity, no bank usage, personal belongings left behind. Detectives reclassify it as suspicious and start focusing on the last person to see the victim alive. often a spouse, partner, or close associate. Search warrants follow for the home, vehicles, phones, and digital accounts. Media coverage can prompt tips. Neighbors who heard a fight, saw a late-night fire, or recall a strong chemical smell. At some point, investigators decide they likely have a homicide without a body. From then on, everything is geared toward building a prosecutable narrative. Cause of death inferred from blood and violence, motive from relationships or money, opportunity from timelines and alibis that don't hold up. Real cases show how varied no-body prosecutions can be. In some, like the famous case of a wife whose blood was found throughout the marital home and in her husband's boat, juries convicted even though the ocean never gave up her remains. In others, financial motives drove the story, life insurance policies, gambling debts, or inheritance disputes. A missing business partner, a forged signature, and surveillance showing the defendant dumping heavy bags at multiple locations can become a compelling mosaic. Technology has played a starring role in many modern cases. A suspect's phone traveling to a remote wooded area at 2 a.m., lingering for an hour, then returning, but the victim's phone signal dying there forever. These cases make headlines because they test the limits of proof. Appellate courts often write lengthy opinions scrutinizing every piece of evidence, setting precedents for how far circumstantial reasoning can legitimately go. Defense attorneys in no-body cases attack the foundation. They argue there is no proof of death, no proof of homicide, and no proof tying their client to any crime. They highlight all the ways people vanish, fleeing abuse, escaping debts, entering underground economies, or suffering unrecorded accidents. They emphasize that absence of evidence is not evidence of murder. They also challenge the state's narrative gaps and leaps. Maybe the blood loss wasn't conclusively fatal. Maybe the suspicious Google searches were curiosity after seeing a crime show. Maybe the defendant's inconsistent statements stem from panic or mistrust of police. Cross-examining experts, they question methodologies, contamination risks, and subjective interpretations, especially in fields like bloodstain pattern analysis. And they warn jurors about the danger of confirmation bias, detectives and prosecutors seeing what they expect to see. Their message: if the state can't even prove a body exists, you cannot lawfully send someone to prison for murder. Because there's no body to confirm what really happened, the risk of wrongful conviction looms large. History includes notorious examples where dead people later turned up alive after someone was convicted of their murder. This is why many prosecutors are cautious. Some offices have unofficial policies against bringing no-body cases unless the evidence is overwhelming. The absence of a body means the story is especially vulnerable to hidden facts, an undiscovered accident site, an untraced new identity, or misconduct by witnesses. On the other hand, never prosecuting such cases would let some killers go free simply because they effectively hid a body. The law tries to balance these concerns by insisting on strong, corroborated circumstantial evidence and careful jury instructions. Ultimately, these trials become a test not just of facts, but of how comfortable we are letting inferences stand in for physical proof when the stakes are literally life and death. Let's pull this together. No-body cases hinge on 3 pillars: proving the missing person is almost certainly dead, that the death was caused by a criminal act, and that the defendant is the one responsible. Without a body, prosecutors build with circumstantial evidence: frozen bank accounts and phones, abandoned pets and possessions, digital footprints, forensic traces of violence, suspicious purchases and cleanups, confessions and incriminating statements, and financial or emotional motives. Juries are reminded that circumstantial evidence can be just as valid as direct evidence, but they also hear warnings about over-reliance on shaky science or unreliable witnesses. Defense attorneys push back hard, offering alternative explanations and highlighting every gap. These cases force the justice system to grapple with uncertainty. They showcase the power of modern technology and forensic techniques, but also their limits. And they raise a profound question. How sure is beyond a reasonable doubt when the single most obvious piece of evidence is missing? If you've stayed with this breakdown of no-body homicide cases, you now have a solid framework for understanding some of the most challenging trials in criminal law. You've seen how prosecutors can secure convictions with no corpse, how defense teams fight back, and why technology is transforming what's possible in court. If you want more deep dives into the cases and concepts that shape our justice system, everything from forensic breakthroughs to famous trials, this is the channel to follow. Take a moment to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss upcoming episodes, and let YouTube know this kind of long-form analysis is worth recommending. In the comments, tell me, do you think no-body murder cases should be brought more often, less often, or only in the rarest situations? And what aspect of these prosecutions surprised you most? Your questions and ideas might shape our next video.